Ian, thank you so much for coming to chat to us. Before we talk about today's game against the Brumbies, let's just briefly reflect on the win against the Waratahs on Saturday. The third victory on the tour for the Lions, but there was a bit of a feeling afterwards, wasn't there, that it was a bit of a flat win, it was a bit of a hard-fought victory. Why is it important that there is a reaction to that today, and how important was that, having to grind out a victory?
I don't think it will do them any harm to have worked hard. They know what they've got to have in place. Interestingly, I think everything was about the breakdown and just the speed that they wanted to put in the game. I mean, they 19, I think, entries into the 22 and didn't convert. So that is important, that I think they look at that. But they'll need that continuity, but I think a power as well about what they do and how they do it with the possession to try and speed up the game through the breakdowns. And there's been a lot of mention about the breakdown work, so I'm sure they'll have been working very hard on what they do every time they take the ball into contact.
It is again a almost completely different team again for today's game, the penultimate warm-up much before the first test. A lot of people are suggesting that this is Andy Farrell's strongest side. Do you agree with that? And is this the right time to play his strongest side?
Yes. 2 games out from a test match. You know, you need to be able to look at the combinations, and I think he's made some calls on that. And quite rightly, there's probably 2 or 3 places you could look at and say players they'll be looking, certainly Andy Farrell will be looking to see what their performance is like. You know, Blake King on at full-back, for example. Tagburn coming back in the front row, really important. And it looks as though he wants to be able to really have a strong power game generally. Kerry in the back row, again, aggressive, competitive back row. So he's got some choices, but he's also got to make sure that those players are in line and on top of their game. But I think he would only want to make 2 or 3 changes from that team that he's putting out.
Yeah, it's a fairly solid look at it, isn't it? And it is a tough test against the Brumbies, arguably the toughest test against Australia so far. They were the top 4 side in the Super League. They are without 8 players who are already with Australia, but how do the Lions want to approach this game? Does that matter? You've got a wry smile there. We talk about the Brumbies missing players.
Yeah, it is about performance from a Lions perspective, and looking. You know, Steve Larkham, as coaches the Brumbies, he's a clever player. He's a good thinker. So they'll have things that they put in front of them that they'll want to try and get an edge and put tactical pressure on the Lions. But the Lions should take control. I'd be disappointed if they don't have control. But by getting control, they can dictate how quickly they play and where they play and when they play. And getting that continuity is going to be important, so that they've got those links between the forwards and the backs at the breakdowns where it has been hit and miss. And then that naturally leads to a continuity without it just throwing the ball around or loose passes, which has tended to occur because they've been rushing things rather than making that sort of speed really part of their game through taking their opponents on.
What are some of the threats that the Brumbies pose, and is the biggest threat the threat of injury for the Lions?
Well, I don't think you think like that. No, it's about a Lions performance today, very, very much so. As I say, I'm sure the Brumbies will tactically change some things to keep them guessing, but they'll have to compete up front. I think if the Lions get it right up front, then they can have the variety. And with Finn Russell at 10 and the 2 half-backs working together again, they'll be able to have, and it's important for them to have a variety in the kicking game, a variety in the running game, and options in the passing game, and actually choose those options and not go looking for them when it's not the right thing. So they'll be looking to build and take the next step forward on the field because of what's happening in front of them, and be really in control of the ball and the speed of the ball, which tends not to have been the case, last weekend against the Waratahs.
Owen Farrell hasn't been involved yet in any of these warm-up matches. What have you made of his call-up to replace Elliot Daly?
You can see the logic in it, you have to say, and it's back to attitude. That he'll on the training pitch, and whichever the team that's playing today, they'll have had Owen Farrell training against them, so he'll be forcing them to make decisions. And with the Lions, training and what you do on the training field is so important, because that's the on the training field the majority of your time, and then see it in the games. So there's no doubt that his attitude and his approach, he'll be challenging players to make the right decision and to react in the right way. So there's definite pluses with having him in that environment, because it needs to be now a really competitive environment on the training field, so that they can push themselves to the next level. It's, in a way, I think the strongest team they can play is actually the team not playing on the weekend, that the squad is that strong. So they've got to try and bring that out of themselves as well, and he'll certainly do that.
And when we briefly talked about injuries earlier, we mentioned Daly. Thomas Williams, of course, was injured a couple of weeks ago. You've been in this camp several times. What's it like seeing a player who gets injured and knows that his Lions to possibly the pinnacle of your career is cut short? Really
sad. I go back to Doddy Weir, being brutally almost attacked on a field when he got injured. You can see that opportunity has just gone, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So there's a genuine sadness around the group when you lose a player. Robert Howley back in '97, but it's also important that as a group, whoever comes in, or what the responsibility is taken by the players and the coaches, just to keep pushing that environment. But you can't, they are often one-off opportunities. So, and Thomas Williams, I think, would have been in the running for a test match spot. I thought he played outstandingly well. So when you see that put on the sidelines, there is a sadness there.